So we now would like to invite our keynote speaker, Françoise Tulkens, who is former judge at the European Court of Human Rights. So take a seat here. So Françoise Tulkens has held leadership positions at the European Court of Human Rights. She has chaired the board of governors at the King Baudouin Foundation and is the author of many publications in the area of human rights and criminal law. It is an honor to have her here today. Thank you very much for coming. And we'll be hearing her for a keynote speech on ensuring safety and equity in academia and research, a matter of justice.
Thank you so much. Thank you for this invitation. It's an honor for me and a pleasure at the same time. So, good afternoon, all of you. Well, ensuring safety and equity in academia and research, a matter of justice. That's my title. Alors, for a long time, it looked as if academia and research would remain completely untouched by gender-based violence, because it was inconceivable that this phenomenon could occur in a place dedicated entirely to knowledge, the temple of the mind. But this has not been the case, and it's only logical. Higher education, institutions, research organizations are not a bubble cut off from society, but a mirror image of it, a microcosm affected by the same crisis and the same question. And this environment and gender-based violence is now a well-documented reality. It needs to be addressed and to be taken seriously for a profound change, not through words, but through action. And that's your title, From Policy to Practice. And I think that's exactly where we are now. While being fully immersed in society and its time, and that's one of the strengths of university. Universitas, in the medial sense of the term, universitas has the power to change society and move it to a more desirable, more fair, more equitable trend. And this is precisely, to my mind, the pivotal point at which universities find themselves today. In this context, I think the ambition of the work that is now being carried out, UNICEF at the European level, of course, and a more limited scale, the expert committee at the UC Louvain. It's a collective work that I had the honor of chairing for 2 years. The ambition of the work is to support the academic institution in this essential transition. It's a transition, and we are there. The stakes are high, very high. Gender-based violence are human rights violation, and that's, for me, that's a more important point, and I will come back to that later. Gender-based violence are human rights violations that have a profound and lasting impact on the victims and society as a whole. And this requires a fundamental approach. Alors, I will begin, I have 30 minutes, and no more than that, I promise you. I will begin by stressing the importance of understanding the roots and reasons for gender-based violence in the social and academic context, and then situating the initiative to be taken within the European and international legal and regulatory framework. And against this background, I will outline very briefly the 3 pillars of action according to the famous Istanbul Convention: prevention, protection, and prosecution. And finally, I'm going to focus on the principles, or the value, but I prefer principles, that should underpin and integrate an inclusive policy in this area. Let's go. Social and academic roots. Gender-based violence against women, whether physical, sexual, psychological, economic, you refer to economic that, in nature, refer to any violence that is direct against a woman because she is a woman, full stop, or that affects women disproportionately, that's exactly what is gender-based violence. And just under bracket, I really appreciate in your document the glossary. Your glossary is great because then we are a solid base, we are a logic base, and we know exactly what you are talking about. So I close the bracket. So that's gender-based violence. And these situations are both the cause and the consequence of unequal power relations based on perceived difference between men and women and leading to what? Subordination. We have seen that for centuries. So this gender-based violence is a social issue that affects all contexts, whether private, public, professional. It's a specific gendered example of the wider social issue of power relation. Now, let's go to the academic context. Gender-based violence in the academic and higher education, and I say academic, academia, higher education all together, or university, without doing any difference between all these terms. So gender-based violence in the academic and higher education environment is linked, of course, to the specific characteristic of this institution. And the characteristic of this institution, they are marked by structurally unbalanced relation and a gender differential. That's for sure. And that's well documented, of course. So the way universities are organized, and I spent almost all of my life in university before joining the court, and we can do the same exercise for the European Court of Human Rights, but that's another story. So the way universities are organized is particularly hierarchical. Is particularly hierarchical, and it's not uncommon for the axes along which power relations develop to overlap, creating either more asymmetrical situation and multiple subordination. Social groups that do not belong to the dominant model, whether in terms of gender, social class, sexuality, will have to prove their legitimacy to integrate into this environment. And I lived that in all my life in university. I'm older than you, so I started that a long time ago. The process is underway, that I have to say. The process is underway, but it's far from being complete. Although gender-based violence is now a real concern in the academic world, as shown, for instance, by the funding rules for the European project, that's for crystal clear, few authorities in university are trained to recognize and deal with it. A case-by-case approach. That was the situation before. It was a case-by-case approach based on this false assumption, and I say false because it was a false assumption, that is the result of an isolated act, still largely dominates. And little attention was paid and still is paid to the structural and organizational dimensions of the problem. First point, social and academic context. Second point, the European and international legal and regulatory framework. The aim here is not to do juridism, not at all. The aim is to place the initiative to be taken within the European and international legal framework to which states are bound and which they are responsible for enforcing. That's for me important to recall. Specific text, of course there are specific texts. European level, 1st of June 2023, the European Union acceded, finally, to the Council of Europe Istanbul Convention of May 2011 on preventing and combating domestic violence and violence against women. For me, it's really the founding text. It's a founding text that states that violence against women is not a private matter. It's not a private matter. It's a violation of women's human rights. I'll come back with that because for me, that's really the gist of the question. It's not a private matter, but a violation of women's human rights. And by positioning itself in this way, this convention places violence against women directly with international law of fundamental rights. And it places this reality within, I should say, a common language that includes universal values and has a widely shared legal protection system, both, and that's very important. Specific text, International Labour Organization Convention 190. This Convention on Violence and Harassment at Work, adopted in 2019 by the United Nations. For me, is the most recent and most modern legal instrument in this area, placing the victim at the center of the concern. That's a point, and I will come back to that, to the conclusion as well. This convention is a fertile, how do you have to say? Fertile, thank you. It's a fertile source of inspiration for integrated and cross-sectoral approach, and I will say a few words about that later. Taking account of people belonging to one or more vulnerable groups based on language, origin, culture, skin color, disability, sexual, gender orientation, family situation. The two very important specific texts. general text, in addition to the specific text on gender-based violence, it's also, we have to add, general text on equality and discrimination. We cannot only deal with the specific text in this field. We have to also to use and to analyze general text on equality and discrimination, which set in motion all the proceedings mechanisms associated with discrimination, which is for me important. I am thinking, of course, of the Directive 2006 of the European Parliament and the Council, 5 July 2006. It's a very old directive. It should be renewed for me, on the implementation and the principle of equal opportunities and equal treatment of men and women in matters of employment and work. It's important. Why? Because it's clear and it's established that gender-based violence decreases when the gap between men and women in the labor market decreases as well. So there is a link between that, of course. At international level, of course, the famous convention, December 1979, elimination of all forms of discrimination against women, the CEDAW Convention. That's the first internationally instrument legally binding for the states that have ratified it, and I hope your state have it. Belgium has done it 3 months ago. No more than 3 months ago. Could you imagine that? 1st of June 2023, at the same time that the UN acceded to the Istanbul Convention, just by accident. So this convention, 79, finally ratified. It is the first instrument that demonstrates a gender understanding of violence against women. You know, we advance step by step. And there is a general recommendation, 1992, on the committee clearly showed that discriminatory practices against women reinforce social norms and gender stereotypes, which in turn help to perpetuate gender-based violence. There is a link between all these situations. Now, finish for the law, even if for me it's quite important, but the most important thing now for the authorities is to take ownership of this text, s'approprier ces textes. I don't know if take ownership is a good expression to express this idea, but I didn't find a better one. So, pour s'approprier ces textes, that's what is important. Not only to say, okay, I've ratified and I have nothing to do. No, s'approprier, to take ownership. Now, point 3. 3 pillars of action. Prevention. Prevention, protection, prosecution. That's very classical. With regard to primary prevention, la prévention primaire, which consists of eliminating or at least reducing, because eliminating, that's a slogan, it doesn't exist, it's impossible. But reducing the risk. Reducing the risk, we need to act on the occurrence of problematic situations. And in this respect, environmental prevention cannot be neglected because, of course, it plays an important role, and very often we don't speak about environmental prevention. Alors, how can we do that? How can we do this kind of prevention to reducing the risk? Alors, of course, through raising awareness. Of course, we have said that. Raising awareness is absolutely vital. Raising awareness, which includes information, communication, professional training. And what I'm saying here is not guidelines or advice. No, that they are legal obligation. An employer, somebody who run a university, Madame Castio, Madame la rectrice, of course, people who run a university has legal obligation in this kind of education institution, and the same for research institution, and especially when these institutions are founded, subsidized, as we say in Belgium, by the public authorities. So there are some obligation there to have this prevention measure. Alors, raising awareness is not only for internal use, I would say. It's also important to external use. And external use is to make the community, and community in its widest sense of the term, aware of gender-based violence, and in particular by integrating, for instance, this issue into contracts with partner organizations, subcontractor, exchange institutions, internship, but everywhere we have to raising awareness about that. That's a general measure, but also specific measure adopted and adapted to the risk of problematic situation arising in the specific context of teaching and research institutions. And also these measures should be taken. And I'm thinking of one, the need to define clear and unambiguous methods to avoid implicit gender bias in people selection and promotion procedure at university and research organization. There are implicit gender bias in this procedure, the selection procedure. And this can include making committee members aware of the existence of this bias, setting up selection committees with equal representation, giving precise instruction on the question asked at the individual interview, gender screening and strict formalization of the criteria for excellence and their weighing. So this implicit gender bias at the first level of selection people at university or in research organization is for me very, very important. And finally, concerning prevention, a prevention policy must involve all the actors. An inclusive policy, it means a policy which concerns everybody, all the actors, in a concerted down-up approach. And I am very, very favorable of a down-up approach. It can have some up-down, but I think what's important is down-up approach. And I think what happened on the ground is really very often the most fruitful initiative. As the French sociologists say, on ne change pas la société par décret. We cannot change society by law. Décret, not in the Belgian sense of the word, but by law. That's for prevention. Protection. Protection is the second pillar. The second pillar of action. We have to act for prevention, protection, and then prosecution. Protection of victims. Okay, but also, and I will come back to victims now in 1 minute, but also of those implicated. And those who are implicated is the protection of witnesses and of people who wish to make a report, bystanders, as you explain in your glossary. Thank you again for the glossary. Those who wish to make a report, bystanders, and the protection of whistleblowers. Whistleblowers in this field, of course, is very important. Without whistleblower, nothing will happen, of course. So these are all situations that require the deployment of robust new systems. Victims, of course, and the center of the situation, must be given a place where they can be listened to and supported in an accessible and independent way, so they can disclose the problem and even lodge a complaint if necessary, in conditions that are safe for themselves and protected against retaliation or reprisal. Believe it or not, but retaliation and reprisal is a reality, and I think it should be analyzed in itself, because it's the most difficult thing. Nobody wants to say something about that, because it's so touchy, it's so sensible, sensitive. But retaliation and reprisal, implicit, explicit, it's a reality. Alors, the issue of anonymity, place which anonymity, yes and no. For me, it's a little bit ambiguous because anonymity, secrecy, and secrecy can prevent control. So we have to find a good balance between secrecy and control, anonymity and control. It's another story, but I'm sure that we have to analyze that in depth. Victim protection covers, of course, physical, psychological, legal, administrative, material, and financial aspect. All these aspects are related in this situation. Again, on the level of protection, the lack of coordination. That we can see that in the report at the UC Louvain, we have seen that so often. The lack of coordination between different actors. And above all, shortcomings in reporting mean that victims are left to ping-pong between various players and end up becoming discouraged, which seems to be in frequent occurrence and increase the black figure. And the black figure, we know that it's enormous in this field. And of course, it changes completely the reality, this black figure. So we have to be very, very cautious about this black figure. Many victims find themselves on sick leave. That is documented. The institution, elles leave the institution, tout simplement. They leave the institution simply before any formal intervention, so nobody knows about that. just they left the institution, which is damaging, both for the individual, for the person, of course, but for the institution as well, because the institution lose skill, tout simplement. So this reporting is part of the protection and should be analyzed in depth. Prosecution. Yes, prosecution. In certain situations, the perpetrators must be punished while respecting the right of the party concerned within the legal framework of both internal procedure under disciplinary law and external procedure under ordinary law, going to the court, to the tribunal, the judicial system, and so on. So on both sides, the rule of the fair trial must be respected. First and foremost, the right of the defense, the presumption of innocence, and the statute of limitation. That's for me the most important thing that should be respected. There are many other judicial guarantees when there is a trial, of course, but these guarantees are really the gist of the fair trial. So it's very, very important. We can also discuss about independent tribunal and so on, but I don't say it's another story. It's related concerning disciplinary procedure. Are the members who are the disciplinary procedure independent judge who have to discuss that, analyze. And as for sanction, I think now the time has arrived, the time has come to be creative. We cannot say that the only sanction in jail and prison and prison and imprisonment. No. In this field for sanction, in this field, I think women have to be creative. We have to find something different. We have to use the sanction in an efficient way. We cannot continue to go along the same line saying that imprisonment is the solution. It's not. It's not. Did you see today or the day before or yesterday? It was an analysis concerning prison. We have discussed that for years. Prison is not the solution. We have to find different things. So I paved the way for a creative analysis. Free, independent support for victims in administrative, legal, financial, and psychological matters should be envisaged. Should be envisaged, as should the creation of a support fund for victims of legal proceedings. And it exists at some university. Maybe there are some representatives here of Lausanne University. I saw that on the document that they have a special fund for victims' legal proceedings. And finally, education and research institutions could consider taking civil action, se constituer partie civile, as we say in the French law, in court alongside the victim to help the victim in his trial. And gender-based violence, why do we have to do that? Because gender-based violence is harmful. Is harmful to those institutions in numbers of ways. Work stoppage of a member of staff, disruption of teaching facilities, lack of security on the campus. So I think it's quite logical that the university help the victim in the legal proceeding. Why not? Why not? Today we say that that's foolish. No, it's not foolish. It's absolutely logical for me because it's harmful to the university. They are on the same line. Alors, voilà, that's the three pillars, prevention, protection, and prosecution. 4 points of my brief intervention, and I hope I don't exceed my time limit, towards an inclusive and integrated policy. What are we talking about? Because we discuss all the time integrate and inclusive policy. An inclusive policy means, to be simple, a policy for everybody, pour tous. That's the point which is absolutely indispensable et irremplaçable. An integrated policy, what it is? C'est une policy to combat gender-based violence which is based on key elements. Simultaneous action on prevention, protection, and prosecution. Simultaneous action. We cannot say that one is better than the other. Prevention, protection, and prosecution. It goes together, and it depends on the case at hand. So simultaneous action on prevention, protection, and support, and going in depth in all these 3 points. Of course, here I just touch upon that because voila, in the keynote I cannot do better, but to go in depth in that. Coordination of factor and system in compliance with legal and regulatory obligation. I'm sorry to put the emphasis on that, but it's too easy to say, well, I don't mind about that. No, it matters. The university, the research organization should apply the compulsory, the obligatory legal instrument. They are there, and of course we can do au-delà, we can do better, we can do, but the first time, at the beginning, we have to respect legal and regulatory obligations. Dynamic monitoring with indicators of the effects of the measure taken over the middle term and the long term. And then clear and appropriate communication to all those are concerned. That's the key element of what we call an integrated policy. Integrated policy and an inclusive policy. That's really the two elements more indispensable. Alors, without going in depth in the analysis of that, which are the essential principles? Which are, for me, the essential principle or the values, because term value is a little bit ambiguous. So the principle that should inspire this kind of policy, inclusive and integrate, to combat gender-based violence, while respecting fundamental rights, academic excellence, and sustainable development. First and foremost, I'm sorry, now I'm come back to what I have said at the beginning, the effective application of the principle of equality. Principle of equality, that's really the horizon. That's really the horizon vers lequel on doit tendre. Equality between men and women and the prohibition of all form of discrimination. Form of discrimination feeds gender inequalities and the intersectional configuration of these inequalities. Effective application from the beginning to the end, from the small thing to the very important one. Effective, every day, always, effective application of the principle of equality. Second principle, recognition of gender-based violence, of violation of human rights of women. So I repeat what I said at the beginning. That's really for me, it's a violation of human rights. It's not a private matter. Before at the European Court of Human Rights, we'll dealt with this, that, saying what it's a violation for family life, or it's a violation. So we try to lodge this complaint under different provisions of the convention. Degrading treatment, family life, private life. No. The revolution is to say it's a human right in itself. The women have the right to live free from violence. And if it's not, eh bien, it's a human right. And sooner or later, we will have a case saying that at the court. And I do hope that we will have it. If there are some lawyers here, well, we don't need a lawyer to lodge a complaint before the court. You can do it. Everybody can do that. If an NGO now decide to lodge a complaint on that, okay, we can do. So that's for me very, very important. And not only it's a violation of human rights, but it's also an expression of a continuum violence that perpetuates a culture of oppression. 3, this situation are structural and systemic, and of course, which requires an intersectional approach. So we have to repeat all the time. Specific attention, 1, 2, 3, 4, it doesn't matter the numbering. A specific attention to people belonging to one or more vulnerable group. There are vulnerable groups at the academia, there are vulnerable groups at the university, there are vulnerable groups at higher education, for sure, and we saw that. We have many testimony of that because of their status, or precarious status, temporary staff, their position, doctoral student, sorry, it's under bracket, but an important bracket. The position of people, the doctorate, for me is very, very, very difficult today. Maybe this is the most vulnerable group in university, and especially foreigner doctorate. So in our report at the UC Louvain, we put the emphasis on that. It's so important. Though we have to put a specific attention to people belonging to one or more vulnerable group because of their situation or other situation, their personal situation, in a situation of disabled people. But there are many situations, or these people are not under the light. The people do not say anything. For instance, maybe you have testimony for that here in the University of Namur, because it was a meeting 2 weeks ago at the University of Louvain, and it was a student, a doctoral student, in a situation of disabled. And he explained in a extraordinary manner the way for him, for instance, it was impossible to have to see his promoter or to have a doctoral program after 8 o'clock p.m. because after 8 o'clock p.m. he cannot have anybody to put him in bed. Voilà, simply as that. He cannot do that himself. He has to use somebody to help him. After 8 p.m., it's impossible. And the court was specially from 7 to 9. So, well, and he multiplied this example. People in this situation, okay, they are just unable to do what they have to do. Donc, specific attention for that, for me, is quite important. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 5. An attitude of understanding towards victims. I think it's important to have an attitude of understanding, not on blaming, understanding. What is the situation? How? Comment? Pourquoi? Without prejudice of the fundamental rights of the people, of the perpetrators. And we have to find, that's always the same in a judicial world. We have to find a balance between different interests. And that's exactly the situation here. And then the social responsibility of the academia, which must embody a role model. Academia, that's our responsibility. We have accept this role model with regard to the student, the community, and the general public. We are privileged at the university. We are privileged, so we have to act accordingly. 3 words for conclusion. The slogan of zero tolerance, no. It should not be used, either in official documents or oral communication. It's impossible to apply. It's impossible to apply for me, and that creates only frustration. So for me, that's really, I don't like. Education, on the contrary, I think that education and research institutions must make it known that they are committed to deploying all the human and material resources required to pursue a gender policy worthy of trust. We have to trust our university. We have to trust. It's not a question of zero tolerance. Second conclusion, whatever measures are taken, they must be backed up by budgetary commitment, that for sure, that guarantee their effectiveness, from policy to practice, from abstract to concrete, from good words to reality. We have to guarantee effectiveness of the measure, and if there are no budgetary commitment, forget. The institution involvement is tested by the resource it mobilizes for its gender policy, and the place given to the issue among other social challenge, of course, at the ABC of political economy, we have to make a balance between different challenges, but gender issue is among them. Voilà, alors I will just a few words to end. The university, I said that at the beginning, is the cradle of knowledge, wisdom, and the Greek goddess, déesse, may we say goddess? Goddess, voilà. The Greek goddess who embodies this value is Athena. Alors, when Poseidon read Melusina, rappel, you remember your high school, in her temple, Athena decided to punish the victim, by transforming her into a frightening gorgon. You remember your classical study. And when I read that again, I said, that's exactly the situation. And it's this mentality, it's this kind of mentality which has obviously been around for a long time, that we need to change today. A mentality that is based on minimizing the facts. For a long time, it was minimizing the facts, denying the suffering of the victim. Yes, it's nothing, ça va passer, comme on dit. There is a movie today, this week movie, ce n'est rien, ça va passer. And blaming the victim. So the problem has a long way to go, and we have a huge task ahead of us. But the academia responsibility, sorry to repeat, but is to use its privileged position and its resources to enable everyone, and especially the most vulnerable people, to live free from all forms of violence. And that's a matter of justice, period, full stop. Voilà, thank you very much indeed for your kind attention. And
thanks a lot for your